Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. This week we are hopefully finishing up my Regency redingote project and maybe even wearing it to an event. If you've missed my previous videos on this project was intended to be worn to a Regency event that is supposed to take place this Saturday. However, it is supposed to take place on a base. And at this point, the government shutdown is still confusing to me. I don't know if it'll be back by then, but the event is not happening if the government is still shut down, and maybe won't be happening if it's only newly back up. So I need to find out if my deadline for this is in just a few days, because it's Tuesday today, and that would be on Saturday. But I'm making a Regency redingote and I'm picking up exactly where I left off in the last week's video. We have mock-up number 2 of the collar pinned in place right here. I am going to sew that in place, and then we are going to try on the top half of this redingote here, and I'm going to try it on with my stays and with a Regency dress, because I'm going to be a responsible sewist, unlike last week when I did not try anything on with stays or with a different dress underneath. I'm finally gonna do it. So yeah, hopefully that will work. The issue with mock-up number 1 was that I didn't get enough like roll in the collar, and I feel like I have PTSD from my rainbow dress that I was making earlier this year with the collar on that, which I still haven't gone back to fix. So I am a little scared of collars at the moment, apparently. But we are going to go ahead and sew this on, try this on, and hopefully have a correct collar. So it's kind of flipping the other way, like with the seam allowance, because nothing is like trimmed. Obviously when you have a curved seam, you need to trim that seam, and nothing is actually tacked down because this is a mock-up. So the inner seam allowance is flipping up. However, I do think I am still getting the roll that I am looking for. I noticed it, like I put this on even before I put on the stays in the dress, and I was getting this roll where you can see it's kind of coming up a little and then coming down. I think that is going to be more pronounced once the seam allowance and everything is tacked down. And frankly, it was looking better somehow before I pressed it. I tried to press the seam allowance down. It didn't work because it's not been trimmed, and it needs to be trimmed in order to be pressed down. Like you need to put the little slits in the curve so that it can flatten out. But I think that's gonna work. I think that looks really cute. And I'm wearing the dress, I'm wearing the stays right now. So basically this is kind of what it looks like closed. Obviously I don't have the facing on here, so the seam allowance is still there. But that's basically the closure right there. So I think we're gonna just run with this collar shape. This seems really good all the way around. I don't think it's too wide because this still has the seam allowance around here. So once we get rid of that, I think that's gonna be the right shape. I know I haven't showed you guys in this video yet, but basically this is what we're going for right here. So, I mean, maybe it needed to come down. I don't know, it's hard to say, but it's awfully close. So I think that that is going to work. Let me just fasten that up the right way. Try and do it side by side with my little mock-up. It's so close that I think it's gonna work. I don't think it needs to come over more. I don't think it needs to be wider around here. This is a blend between 2 collars in this Laughing Moon pattern, in case you haven't seen the last 2 videos. I am using Laughing Moon number 137, which is the Ladies Police and Spencer for this. And basically these are the 2 collar patterns. You can see the smaller one up top, and I kind of went in between them. So I kind of like traced out a line over here so that it would be not wide and pointy like this other one, but wider than this one right here, which is the large rounded collar. So yeah, I think that is the right shape. I'm still a little torn on the sleeve width, I have to admit, because putting it on, it was still like a little bit of a struggle to get it on over my long sleeves, mostly just that they made the long sleeves ride up on my arms even though I was holding on to the bottom. And so like, I don't love how many wrinkles there are on this, especially once I bend my arm, and that is all because it's too big, but I don't know that I really want to go much smaller. And I do think that the like end is the right width, or really close to it. This one hasn't been hemmed. I folded back the hem on this one, but it's not actually hemmed in place. But Yeah, I might kind of just make my seam allowances a little bit larger on the sleeve just to make the sleeve itself a tiny bit narrower. It's close, it's just not quite there. So let's make a few changes. Okay, that feels a lot better. Up in like the kind of center of the arm, I actually took it in, I think, over an inch. And then I kind of tapered it out to about here and tapered it out pretty much to the armpit, like a couple inches shy from the armpit. And I think that that is a much better fit for the sleeve. Obviously, they're still wrinkling, but not nearly as much as there was before. And it was still easy to get on. It doesn't feel tight or constricted in any way. So I think that means that we are ready to take the collar mock-up off. Oh, I also pinned up the sleeves on both sides, matching them. So the next things that I'm going to do are hem the sleeves for one thing, because I can just do that now nice and easy. And then take this collar mock-up off and cut out interfacing to go on this side. I'm going to interface the bottom side and then also cut out the furry side, figuring out what direction I want the stripes of the fur to be in, because in case you missed those last videos, this fur does have like a slight rib to it that the Caroline collar does not actually have, but I think that this is still going to be just fine, and it's really nice and soft and not like quite as fakey looking as the other fur option that I had. So yeah, we are going to go ahead and do those and put the full collar on. Something that you have to think about with fur, even with a short pile faux fur like this, is that when you at first do the seam, which I have now attached the satin on the back here, when you at first do it, you're going to wind up with an edge like this, where all of your fur has kind of gotten tucked into the seam right along the edge. So what you need to do is you can go in there with a pin or any other small thing. I would use like a strong pin. That's what I personally used on this side, where I just kind of picked out the fur from that seam. You want to obviously not pick out the fabric. You're just going in there with the pin right along the edge there and just lifting the edges of the fur out to make a much more natural edge where you can really see the little fluff, as opposed to like over here where it is so clean and you pretty much wind up seeing the satin. So once I pick out this edge over here, right now this is just pinned in the center, but this is going to have binding over the edge. It's going to have a facing over the edge. So this doesn't actually need to be finished. I didn't serge any of this, by the way. I just did this on the sewing machine, but this can now get attached to the collar, and then the excess can get cut off, giving it a nice small seam allowance, cutting into the curve, and then that can have the facing added later. The collar is attached and I can't do the facings without adding the skirts, so let's go ahead and add the skirts. I have attached the skirts to the bodice. So you can see the little pleats right in the back there. I just did a couple of kind of wider knife pleats, and they do overlap just a little bit with each other, but I just did the 3 on each side and I thought that looked nice and crisp. I think that's going to look really good. I did not pay attention to the pleat like arrangement that this pattern says to do. This was just what I visually thought was going to look really good. And then over in the front we have our little box pleat here to mirror the one that is on Caroline's. This again is not in the pattern. This was something that I adapted, I think, in the last video to add, because the front of the pattern is actually just flat, but I wanted to mirror that little pleat right there. So what happens next is I am in the process right now of hemming the sleeves. That's obviously hand sewn. My needle is stuck in there right now. And then the other thing is the facing. So with the facing, there are pattern pieces for this. I think that mine should be fine except for the length. Like I need to add more length to this and possibly to this. I need to double check what length I need to add, but basically there are 3 facing pieces. I'm not really sure why there's that many, maybe just to save on like pattern fabric layouts, because frankly I don't want to add any more bulk to the waist, so I'm combining these 2, or at least that's the plan. I am going to just do one long facing piece all the way from neckline to hem, and then also have it go around the neck. This one is cut on the fold, so I think there's really no way that I can get away without having a little seam on the shoulder, but I'm going to cut all of these out of just the acrylic. It doesn't need to be like anything thick because this is already really quite thick and sturdy. So I'm not trying to add any more bulk to the closure or anything like that. I know sometimes in facing, like for buttonholes or something like that, especially if working with a thinner fabric, you're going to want to have like interfacing in that. And in fact, this might say, no, actually, this does not have interfacing, like you don't cut interfacing, but a lot of times in commercial patterns, you do see that you will add interfacing to a facing piece. I'm not doing that. I'm not even adding anything structural here. This is just the acrylic fabric, even though it is pretty drapey, and it's just to give a nice finish to the edges. So I'm going to finish hemming the sleeves and cut all of that out, sew that all on right sides together. It even goes like over the collar area, and then it'll flip underneath that collar seam, underneath like the neck, and it will enclose everything all nicely there, and then that'll get all hand whip stitched down so that it is attached to the lining from the inside. I'll show you as I go how that works, but once that is finished, then basically we're pretty much wearable. I'll have to add closures, and obviously I have to add the details that make it Caroline's redingote. So that is the velvet band around the waist and the velvet right here, and these are just going to be like external pieces that are going to go across the actual functional closure. Now, what I have not done is look through my stash for buttons that look like this. So I think I'm actually going to do that next before I even tackle the sleeves, because if I need to order something, I need to order it stat, and it has to be from Amazon because there is not time. It is Wednesday evening right now. I am going off to rehearsal in about an hour and a half, and I have very minimal time tomorrow evening to sew, and then Friday. And I have found out that the event is partially a go. The hunt that this event is supposed to be is not happening. Really, this event is supposed to be like go see off the start of a hunt, and it's for the blessing of the hounds, and then there's like a hunt breakfast. That is what this event is meant to be. But the hunt itself takes place on a base. So it's still questionable whether bases are going to be accessible on Saturday, and at this point I think they have just called off the hunt and they are just doing the blessing of the hounds and a breakfast. And so I don't know if I want to do that or not, because it is fairly early in the morning on a Saturday. And I don't know how finished this will be by then, because I would also still like to make the hat. So I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna go look up some buttons. I'm gonna sew the hems of the sleeves, and I'm gonna cut out a facing. I have a redingote that is almost wearable. All of the facing is done. The hems on the sleeves are done. I don't even remember if I mentioned that to you guys or not. But yeah, I've sewn all of the facings down on the insides by hand. I think they look really nice. The pleats look nice and crisp like I showed you before. So what needs to happen next are closures and a hem, because I am tripping over this right now. Honestly, it is so long that I may need to cut some of the length off. In the front, it is dragging on the ground by probably 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. In the back, it's got a full train. Like there's probably 5 inches on the ground is my thought, and that's a much deeper hem that I want. So I'll probably be cutting off some of that length. So I have everything on right now, corset, dress, etc., to kind of check that length. I didn't put shoes on, but Regency shoes are flat, so that part doesn't matter. I did also go through my button stash, and I looked for some buttons. The best ones that I have found are these little gold buttons. So there's this one right here, the eagle style, and then this one has like a crest on it instead. The eagle ones need to be cleaned because some of them, I need 6 for this project, and some of them are a little tarnished. So I need to figure out if I can clean them. And frankly, they're all a little bit smaller than I would ideally want. Really, I'd want something probably close to 3/4 inch, but I don't have anything like that. So we will make do with these for now. What obviously also needs to happen with this is the decoration. So we need the velvet belt, we need the velvet bands across the chest before we can add those buttons on. But most importantly, we want to make this wearable first. Though that said, I have decided not to go to the event, so I don't actually need it wearable by tomorrow, Saturday. I just need it wearable by the end of this video. Sunday, I get 1 extra day. I decided not to go for a combination of reasons, mostly because it is a reduced event, also because it is raining, and also because it is super early in the morning that I'd have to get up to be able to get there on time because it's a morning event. So for all of those reasons, especially the rain, I am just going to wait for a break in the rain and show you the finished look like in a park or something like that, instead of at this hunt event. So I am going to go and mark my placement for my hook and bar closure right now. And I'm also going to go mark my hem, and I'm going to go take care of hand sewing all of that. All right, we're doing this mirror style so that you can see the hem, but I have folded it up initially, which is actually like 6 3/8 inches in the back was how much I folded it up. And it is still like just touching the ground. So that needs to go up higher. The whole thing needs to go up higher. Like, while this is definitely a feasible length for a redingote, I want mine to be shorter. I think I'm gonna go another like 2 inches shorter all around probably, and we'll see what that looks like. But also all of my hooks and bars are now all sewn on. I brought the hem up a little bit more than 1 inch in the front, and I think we're at a good level there. However, I feel like the back is still a little bit long, even though I brought that up 2 inches. It's basically impossible for me to show you the back, but it is maybe 1 inch off of the ground. And yeah, it just still feels like a little long just in that back section. Like the side I think is fine. So I'm just gonna fold that up a little bit further and hopefully that will work. I know this doesn't look like much, but I brought it up another 0.75 inches in the back, and I feel like that was what was needed. So I'm ready to sew the hem into place. Hi, Cookie. The hem is done, so it is finally time to move on to the bands across the bust as well as the belt. You can see what those bands look like here. I've decided to use my cotton velveteen for these, and at least for the belt, I am going to do it double-sided like you can see on the belt here. Haven't quite decided with these because I think these are actually made out of ribbon, which like I do have navy ribbon, but then it wouldn't match with the belt. This is the navy ribbon I have, and I kind of doubt that I would have enough to literally just use navy ribbon instead of fabric. Plus then, I don't know, I just worry that the belt would be like a little bit flimsy if I were to do that. If this is a full spool, I should have enough to do all of that, but I had also already planned to use this for my hat because you can see that there is navy velvet ribbon around the hat band. So I would need to make sure that I'd have enough for this, plus the little bits here on the bust, plus the waist. Or I suppose I could always maybe get away with doing these two. What's interesting to me is that this is very much a different ribbon. Like you can see it's a fully different color. I would love mine to be unified, but that said, my cotton velveteen is a much darker blue than the ribbon. And frankly, I like the blue of the ribbon a lot better. So it is tempting to use this for everything. However, I don't want to make the belt any narrower. So it's not like I could actually sew this as the belt. I'd have to use it as a flat ribbon, and it's, I don't know, I mean, it's relatively flimsy. It's a ribbon, and I feel like the belt kind of wants a little bit more structure. So I decided to measure the ribbon just as like a test to see if I did have enough or not. I don't think I have enough because nearly half of what I have, which is probably the full spool, but it's only a 3-yard spool, and nearly half of what I have, I think would wind up going into the hat. And it's hard to say for certain until I actually make the hat, which is of course what I was going to do after doing all of the trim. But regardless, like if I am left with just this, that is enough for either the waist or the bust, not both. And so I think if anything, I don't know, like honestly, I want things to match, and this does not match with this fabric, and this is what I have. Like I can do this, I can do this, I can do a combo of this. I don't have other things. So her hat does not match the bands on the redingote as much as I would like them to. So what makes sense to me is to do the bands out of this and save this for the hat and just have like excess, even though it probably would be so much easier to do this as like the little bits going across the chest. But at the same time, would they be durable if they're just made out of ribbon? Yeah, so I think I'm probably going to do everything on the bodice out of the fabric, the velvet fabric. and leave this just for the hat, even though I wish I could just use this for everything. Actually, you know what? I just measured what I think I would need for everything on like the waist and the bodice and everything. And I think I am only 10 inches shy from my like rough estimate plus extra with the hat as well. And so I'm actually thinking maybe we do the hat first so that I know how much ribbon the hat would take up. And then we come back and do the decoration on the bodice. I think that's the answer. So let's talk about how this hat is made. First, I was going to go look for a pattern for like, I think, is this called a toque? Honestly, I don't even know. I was gonna go look for a pattern for a little hat like this. But frankly, a hat like this is pretty darn simple. And I have made many hats with the upper portion of this before, because what we're looking at is a gathered circle. That's what this big blue part is. It's a gathered circle. It is being gathered down to a band. You can see the band right here. So this band on her hat is actually just one layer, and then there's top stitching. So when we look at the inside, you can see that it is attached, the band is attached to both the gathered section of the top of the crown as well as to the furry section. And the little furry brim, I guess for lack of a better term, at the bottom, I believe that is just cut relatively circularly. Like if we look at it like this, it is the taffeta on one side, or the satin, or what I use for the underside of the collar. It is that on one side, which is actually the upper side, and then it's the furry on the bottom side, and then that just gets turned up so that it kind of covers the bottom of the ribbon here. It is wider up here than it is down at the seam, and the way that this is set, I think, has the widest part literally across from the seam. I'm pretty sure, and the seam is designed, I think, to be the back of the head, but that doesn't really matter so much. So basically what I need to know is what measurement I want for it to go the band around, and I have to figure out where the hair fits into this if I'm going to actually be wearing a Regency hairstyle, because a Regency hairstyle is up. Caroline is a child, so I can forgive the fact that her hair is down. And I feel like that's true of all American Girl dolls, basically. Unlike when we watch a historical movie and everyone's hair is down and they're adults and they shouldn't be, with the dolls, they're children. So it's okay, because usually children didn't necessarily have their hair up. That said, I'm an adult. I should have my hair up. So I have to figure out if this would sit like above a bun, or if I need to incorporate that within the measurement. So I'm just gonna probably play around for a little bit of like what that would feel like, where the band would sit on my head. It comes down pretty low on Caroline's head. Like this is how it sits on Caroline's head. I don't think that this really has very much historical accuracy, because although you do see hats with this larger crown, they wouldn't generally sit like this on someone's head, I don't think. So I might look at some fashion plates first just to really decide. But I mean, it's a super, super cute hat. And I'm gonna make it regardless because it goes with this as a cosplay. But I do kind of want to play and toe that line of like cosplay and historical accuracy. So I'm going to do a little bit of research on that, figure out the band measurement that I need, and then I'm hoping that I maybe still have like the dimensions of my pincushion hat, because if you've been around my channel for a long time, because this was, I think, fall 2020 that I made this project, I made this dress right here, which is a Hussif dress. It is a 19-teens dress. 19-teens pulled a lot from the Regency, and this was actually a fancy dress costume that they would have worn for fancy dress. But the hat shape is honestly pretty similar. The main difference here being that this has padding in it and the Caroline hat has no padding, and then her like brim, for lack of a better term, isn't really a ruffle. It is like an actual curved brim that can be folded up. But otherwise the shape is honestly pretty similar. And without poking myself in the head with a pin, because there are actual pins in this, I mean, like, this is kind of how hers sits on the head, again minus the padding. So I might just kind of like use these dimensions to figure mine out. This has a fitted band as well, you can see. It even has a bow kind of in a similar place. So yeah, I think that this will be a good jumping off point for figuring her hat out. And I'm gonna go get all those dimensions. So I've made a little mock-up of the top of the crown part based on the same dimensions as the pincushion hat. But I feel like it's really small. Like obviously it fits my head, but I feel like hers just has all of that volume up top and this is not giving it. Now that said, obviously right now with just a single layer of the blue acrylic, which is what I've used for my mock-up, it's not going to have the body. Like this is too drapey droopy to be able to have body to stand up at all in that sort of poof. My plan is to line it with the same polished cotton that the entire redingote is lined with. I think that will give it appropriate body. I don't have enough of that to be able to make mock-ups out of that, but I do think that I need to recut this. This was 17 inches across in diameter, and I think maybe if I add like, I don't know, at least an extra 2 inches, that then we'll probably get to the right place. Just too bad. I mean, I hate wasting fabric, even though I do still have a whole lot of the acrylic left, but I just feel like this is too small. Okay, mock-up number 2. Somehow I feel like this doesn't feel any bigger. I know it is, like I know that functionally it is. I'm trying to hold it up to see more what it will look like once it actually has the layer with the body in it. I think I'm gonna go with this because I think that if I went any larger, it might get silly and I don't want it to be silly. And obviously we are going to have like the band on this, we're going to have the brim, etc. So there's going to be more to it than just the poof. But I think that this size poof will work. So this one was the one that was 19 inches across. Actually, to be honest, I did it just slightly larger. I think it was like 19¼ inches across, but yeah, that should work. So I'm gonna take out my gathering stitches and cut that out in the polished cotton as well. And then serge the edges to flatline and gather up the edges and add them to the band, which I've already created the band here, or you know, as much as I can. It is the acrylic, and then I have interfacing, just iron-on interfacing in there. So I'm also probably going to serge along those edges, though they'll all be encased, but just to keep those 2 layers together. And then this is going to wind up being folded, and obviously the seam allowance is folded down as well, but the poof part will stick out of the top of the band like this, and then I will have to figure out the brim. The brim's going to be probably a lot of trial and error as well, because I'm really not sure about that shape. So we're just going to have to experiment. The top part is done. So I have my little like blue chef's hat here. And now I'm ready to figure out the brim. Well, I have brim mock-up number 1. But it's a little bit big. It definitely needs to be cut down. I have already folded down the seam allowance up here and it just kind of winds up looking like a sailor hat. So I think this needs to be a little narrower all the way around because it's also too wide back here. Not by a ton, but it definitely does need to be a little bit shorter. By the way, I did look up whether this type of hat was historically accurate. And actually it is. So I just wanted to show you a few examples over here of redingotes being worn with hats like this. One thing that you can see is that the brim actually does tend to be quite small. I'm probably not going to go that small because I do like the shape of Caroline's brim, which is a little bit larger, but obviously we cannot do it this large. So I am going to just cut off some of that brim and like fold back down more of the seam allowance there, and we will just hopefully come up with something a little bit closer to Caroline's. This is definitely closer. I'm a little bit torn because I think it is still a tiny bit tall and maybe needs a more drastic slope as it goes towards the back as opposed to being more gradual. It's definitely close. I think I'm going to try without cutting off more because I did actually cut off quite a bit. I think I already threw the piece away, but I cut off quite a bit to then fold down the seam allowance again. I think this time I'm going to try to just fold the seam allowance down a little bit more and see if I can get a shape that is even better. Okay, I think we are there. Maybe bringing this back up just a little bit right here so it's a little bit more asymmetrical, but beyond that I think that is the right size. So I am going to cut off the excess and cut out the same in the fur and put that together. So naturally, I just attached these brim pieces together and then remembered that I was going to interface the satin side. And I did not do that yet. And all of my interfacing is pretty crappy, frankly, but it still definitely needs interfacing. So I guess I'm taking that apart and interfacing it unless I can somehow interface it while it's already attached, which I'm probably going to try. Nope, never mind. I'm taking it all apart because the other mistake that I made was I attached this long seam together before I actually sewed each of these end to end together, and I should have done that. So I'm taking apart everything that I just did, and I'm going to interface the satin part. Then I'm going to sew the ends together for each layer, and then I'm going to go back and do this seam. All right, now that this is actually interfaced and sewn together properly, I can go ahead and cut all of my little notches around this whole curve and turn it right sides out and press it. And then I'm just going to serge this edge with like both layers together once it's turned together, because that is how it is on this hat as well. I mean, really what I probably should have done was, instead of folding the band over, I should have done 2 separate bands so that I could encase everything all really nicely. But I didn't think about that until afterwards. So I have a folded band, and the brim part is just going to tuck up on the inside and then get top stitched in place along this edge. Here is the brim all assembled. I wound up basting a 1/2 inch from the edge for 2 reasons. 1, just to baste the 2 layers together before I serged, and 2, to help me line up how this is going to go into the brim over here, like to kind of give me a guide point. This is inside out, but give me a guide point for where this should be attached, so that I can see it right on the edge. And now I can sew those together, and then our hat just needs a ribbon band and it'll be done. So I sewed the brim on with the top stitching. You can see the top stitching here, but really as I'm rolling the brim up, this wants to flip down as well. So I'm gonna go around and hand sew that down, but otherwise we now have our fur brim on the hat and we can do the ribbon. In playing around with the ribbon on here, I feel like I'm realizing A, why the ribbon on Caroline's hat seems like it's a slightly off color, like it's a little bit lighter, and B, I don't think this ribbon is wide enough either. I do not have wider velvet ribbon, like in any sort of shade of blue. The only thing wider velvet I think that I have is black, and I don't think I want to go that route because especially when you combine black with navy, it winds up looking like a mistake as opposed to like a positive thing. I don't really have time. I mean, I do have time because I'm not making this for a specific event now, but I wanted to finish this by tomorrow, so I don't really have time to like order other ribbon, which I'm tempted to do, but also that is kind of like a crapshoot because what if it's the wrong shade when it gets here, etc. But I just feel like this is completely disappearing. Like it needs to be wider, and I think it needs to be a lighter color of blue. If I do that, it does mean that I could use this for all of the bodice trim and belt, which would be a positive. And I do have like wider ribbon, like navy ribbon, that is just not velvet. I've got this one right here. I don't know that this will, you know, be a good idea either, but maybe it would at least give me an idea of the width. Like if, oh yeah, see with this width, this is the right width because now I see it above the crown or all around here. It disappears behind here, but that's exactly like hers does. So I need ribbon that is, I think this is at least 2 inches wide, maybe even a little bit wider. Ideally, I'd want it to be velvet. Ideally, I'd want it to be like this shade of velvet, but that is going to be a hard shade to look for on like Amazon or something like that. And I really do try not to shop on Amazon. It's just impossible without Joann's to not shop on Amazon. I might go on and look and see if they have something like this, because that would kind of solve a lot of issues, and hopefully it would get here in time for a not rainy day when I can take pictures, which I think is like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week are supposed to be not rainy, because we've had rain for as longer than I can remember at this point, but such is Seattle. I do also have this interesting wired ribbon, which is not at all velvet. This is the back side, I think, of this ribbon, but I feel like it kind of gives off the same vibe as her ribbon because of the way that it reflects light. Basically, it's got silver over the edge, and then there is metallic in the ribbon, but frankly, the metallic is on this side, not the back side, but that might be a good alternative if I can't find something that can get here quickly. The hat is done. I sewed on the band to the hat, but then I did glue on the bow to the band, although the parts of the bow are also sewn together other than like the middle section right here. The middle section is a full loop that goes around the bow, but then I glued it to the band just because that was going to be easier than having to hand sew. However, I did notice when I went to go put Caroline's hat on her that I did it the opposite side. So her bow's over here, mine's over here. Oh well, that's just how it wound up. I think because of like me doing the mock-up but then flipping that to the reverse, it made it so that the taller section was here instead of here. No biggie, like it's totally fine, and it's really, really cute. I really like how this hat turned out. It is just slightly large on my hair right now, but I think that once I have actual like Regency hairstyle in, it will be perfect. So that is great. And now I can figure out what I'm doing with the bands on the front of the bodice and on the belt. I think I'm probably going to use the ribbon. Like, I think I'm probably going to cheat, sew the buttons on the ribbon, sew probably some like hooks and bars, I think. I mean, hers is Velcro. We're not doing Velcro. So yeah, we're going to figure that out and put that all on, and then it'll be done. I don't know if you can tell back there, but the belt is pinned on. I am going to add a couple of tack marks on the side seams. Hers is actually like stitched down fully just by machine on the side seams. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a couple of tacks, maybe also in the center back, just so it kind of stays in place. I was going to put the buttons on, except that the buttons that I had pulled out that were like so small, they're too small. I need bigger buttons. So I have now ordered buttons on Amazon. I ordered 2 sets of buttons. There was a plastic set of 1-inch gold buttons that could get here tomorrow. There is also a metal set that I prefer, and I'd prefer them to be metal in general, that will get here on Monday. So I'm gonna see which one of those is better. Today is Saturday, by the way, but I have to wait for the buttons before I can really finish things. And then the other thing was I went to go start pinning on the ribbon for across the bust here, and I just can't see what it will look like on the dress form because it does not fit the same as like when I'm wearing my Regency stays and everything. So I have to put those on. It's midnight. I'm not putting those on right now. So that will wait until either tomorrow night or on Monday. Again, I don't think I can take pictures of this until at least Tuesday. So it's not really a problem that I can't do that yet. That does mean that I also can't do the hooks and bars on the straps yet. But I don't think that that's a really big issue. That shouldn't take long. Hopefully I will be able to sew those on without it being like that obvious that they're underneath there. I'm hoping that I can kind of hide those points with the buttons. That's my goal. But for now, I have to put her aside until at least tomorrow night, if not Monday, and then I will pick her back up and finish those last few items. So first off, I just want to say that it feels really rather lovely in this redingote right now because this room is really quite cold. I don't run the heat in here when I'm not in here, and I haven't worked in here for 2 days. And so it's like 55 degrees in this room. And I feel really quite lovely with this redingote on. And then secondly, I am now ready to put the ribbons onto the chest. And one other thing that I'm trying to decide on here is that her redingote has the belt only attached at the sides and then is completely loose, and it overlaps quite a bit here where the closure is, where the Velcro closure is. And therefore, like, nothing is attached to the redingote. We've got a big overlap. I could do that. Right now, obviously, I do have it pinned in a couple of places nearer to the center than just the side seams. I suppose I should unpin those just to see kind of how it works, because right now, if I do the overlap, I have this section over here, and then this section will come over and come over here, and we'll have closures there, and we would need a return hook over here so that things don't slip all over the place. Or my other thought is, what if I don't actually continue this past the like seam here, the closure, and it basically just goes kind of underneath the closure, and then I just have this one come over, and I could put in another set of like tacks in place so that it stays in place over here. I could tack this one down like pretty near the center as well, so that I really only have this little overlap where it's loose. Kind of thinking I may actually do that because I just feel like it makes more sense than having like a big separate belt like this, where then you have to worry about like, oh, is part of it showing? I have to do return hook, like etc. So I may do that. But I also now need to see where the placement of these go. So I'm gonna go look in the mirror, see like how wide they should be, where exactly they should lay, and hopefully mark and pin those into place. Okay, actually I see why they did that, why they had like the overlap, because if I just put this inside and then close it, I don't know if this is going to show up on camera at all, but it just looks like one side of the belt is going in underneath and it doesn't look like a belt. So never mind. We're going to not do that idea. We're going back to the plan of hers. They are going to overlap over the seam and we will have a return hook because it just looks better that way. Okay, I think I've figured out my placement. It is 5.5 inches from the waist seam up to the bottom of this following the bust darts, and then it is 1.5 inches between these two bands. I do feel like mine are like, I don't know, they feel more crunched together with larger space here than Caroline's. To be honest, I didn't do the scale math on mine like I normally would, but I also know that it doesn't really exactly relate because I'm pretty sure scale math on mine says that my ribbons are too narrow as well. Obviously, I'm not making them larger because I can't. So I think I'm gonna have to live with it. I might do the scale math just for kicks and see what it says. But otherwise, I think we're gonna go with this. So scale math wise, my like best guesses at the layout was actually pretty darn close to what it would be if I had a ribbon that was the correct width. Because according to the scale math, my ribbon, and that's these two ribbons, this one's actually a little bit wider, but my ribbons should be 1.94 inches wide. They're 1.5 inches wide. So we're starting a little bit off just from that. However, interestingly enough, the scale math of how big this gap should be was 5.5 inches. So that was kind of crazy to see. So like this one right here is starting exactly where it should. However, this one, if anything, would be a little bit low because the space up top should be smaller. But I feel like if I space them out wider, that would also look weird because the thing is that her gap on hers, so these are 7/16 inches wide, both the ribbon and the gap. So all of these are 7/16 inches wide, which would be 1.94. So right now I have 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. And so I feel like that's about as good as we can get it with having our scale incorrect. So I'm gonna go with this. I am going to stitch them in place on this side. I think I'm even going to do a little tack like towards the center so they're not just hanging loose. And then over on this side, we're going to do the closures. I'm trying to think of like what would be the most flush closure. And I'm kind of thinking maybe a hook with a thread bar, but I might have to play around with that a little bit. Oh, also I got the first set of buttons that arrived yesterday. These are the plastic ones. They're fine. And I mean, the good thing about plastic is that it won't like pull at the ribbon since I'm going to be going with relatively minor support here supporting these buttons. But I do really want to see what the ones that are supposed to arrive today are going to look like. They're out for delivery. It says max time for delivery should be 25 minutes from now. But they're not here yet, so we'll see. But hopefully in the time that it's taking me to start tacking this, they will arrive. I stopped recording that last clip and literally seconds later Cookie started barking because Amazon had come, and I just looked at the buttons. They are kind of rose gold, not like gold, but frankly, they're so pretty. So just to show you the color comparison with all of the glare and everything, these are the ones that just arrived. You can see they are definitely more rose gold. However, look how pretty these buttons are. They're so pretty. So, and they're not that heavy, honestly. I mean, they are heavier for sure, but they are not that heavy. I think they're going to be fine. And they're just so much prettier that, yeah, we're going to go with these buttons. Okay, I know I'm probably going to regret saying this on camera, but I feel like where I have everything pinned on right now, I am concerned about the placement of these buttons and if they look, I don't know, not inappropriate, but if they just look like they are in a spot that they shouldn't be. So part of me is thinking maybe raise both of these just a little bit, like half an inch. I'm also wondering, like, so when I first cut this one, because I cut the top one first, I thought that it had lined up with the darts for the edges. And then I went and I cut this one, and obviously these are on the darts, so it's a lot easier to tell that they're lined up with the darts. And it made me realize, oh, the top one is actually smaller. I do have enough velvet ribbon left. I could recut the top, or I could trim the bottom one down a little bit more, but I think I like this width. I feel like that looks good. I don't know. I have to play around with things a little bit, but the first thing I'm going to play around with is just moving them up slightly. I decided to move them up a full inch from where they were before, and I think they look way, way better now. So we've got our placement. Now I can go ahead and start sewing everything into place, and then we'll be done. And that is Caroline. I am really pleased with how it came out, though I do actually need to make a couple of tweaks because I placed the bars just, I think, too close in. So this one popped off at one point. It's just a little bit too loose. That one's pretty close. This one, it's like it's got a little sort of a bubble right here where I think it's that it's trying to be in the bar, but the bar needs to be just a little bit farther over. And then the waist, I actually wound up pinning the waist because it is just like, it's very much too like loose, set too loose. So I need to move, I guess, 4 bars. That'll be an easy fix. And I did decide to do all of those pictures with like a Caroline sort of wig going on, just because I know that in the future I'm not going to be wearing it this way. This is not something that I'll be wearing to like Comic-Con, for example, because it's too warm. I can't wear it to Comic-Con. Honestly, even at the park where it was 49 degrees, that is really too warm for it as well. Frankly, this does a fantastic job of acting like a winter coat. It's very cozy, and oh my gosh, this fabric is just like, it's so soft. Like, I just kind of want to pet myself. It's such beautifully soft fabric. This acrylic has honestly worked out super, super well. And even with just the acrylic and the cotton lining, it's very, very well insulated. So yeah, overall, very pleased with this project. I think the hat came out super cute as well. I will definitely be wearing this for wintry Regency events. I just hope that we have some because I want to wear this for Regency events. And of course, in that case, I'll be styling it with my own Regency hair as opposed to the blonde wig. But yeah, that's going to be everything on this project. If you have enjoyed this video and this project as a whole, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming or sewing related content out on Saturdays. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Guardian level patrons, Jean, Kim, and the Dowager Duchess Isabel Thompson. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!